So we left off, and O'Brien was just telling Winston about the real nature of his position, that they're the walking dead, that they have no hope to live in this better world that the Brotherhood is trying to bring about, right? But that it's a goal for a future generation. And, it's right here that I want to double check with the reader and say, do you see Winston's position in this all along? If O'Brien drew him out, because all along Winston is quite naive. He keeps saying to himself and thinking to himself that at the end of the day, Big Brother, they can't read your thoughts. They can't know what a person is thinking. By the time Winston is at the mercy of O'Brien and the party in room 101, O'Brien is telling Winston what he's thinking over and over again. He's reading it on his face, he's reading it in his body language, and also all along, turns out Winston was writing a journal, Winston was meeting with Julia in secret. Well, that stuff was all written down, and O'Brien and the thought police had read it, and then they had listened in on the conversations. So how does Big Brother actually come to know what people are thinking? At the end of the day, nothing is hidden. People will tell you in one way or another what they are thinking through their body language, through their writing, through, no matter what they do, people are always revealing themselves, right? And their motives and why they're doing what they're doing, whether or not anyone understands that. In Winston's case, he doesn't understand anything. I wonder how many people, when you read 1984, because this is going to be my question to leave off on this video, really is, and this topic, the tragic irony of 1984, and my most important question for any reader, especially for first-time readers, especially young readers. Like, I read this book when I was young, and I actually thought, somewhere early in the story, I thought there was hope for Winston. I thought he was going to get a happy ending. I'm like, oh, the hope is in the pearls? Well, let's see that. That'll be exciting. There'll be explosions and exciting events will happen and something good will happen, right? They're building a better future here. No, 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 not in the slightest. Winston, the reality is Winston doesn't stand a chance, and he as an individual never stood a chance. So I wonder, do readers, with your first time through, did you actually believe in Winston? Did you believe in his hope? Did you believe that the revolution was going to be televised? Did you believe that Krusty was going to be here? I'm serious about this question because I remember as a kid when I read it, I remember definitely thinking like, oh, you know, we're going to see, like, finally this terrible regime will be overthrown, when the whole time it's the exact opposite thing is taking place. You're not seeing anything be attacked or overthrown. You're not seeing anything be diminished. You're only seeing Big Brother grow in power. And again, Winston understands the how, but not the why. And it's not until he's in room 101 with O'Brien that he learns the why. O'Brien tells him why. Um, so here's an example where, sure enough, I told you, said O'Brien, that if we met again, it would be here in room 101, in the Ministry of Love, in the Ministry of Torture. Yes, said Winston. Then he tortures him, zaps him. You are afraid, said O'Brien, watching his face, that in another moment something is going to break. Your especially fear is that it will be your backbone, right? So he's reading his mind. Okay, I'm thinking of trouble. Oh, so this is where O'Brien gives his villain monologue, right? O'Brien's manner became less severe. Remember, he's not, for being a civilized man, here he is torturing Winston, another civilized man. He resettled his spectacles thoughtfully and took a pace or two up and down. Then he spoke. His voice was gentle and patient. He had the air of a doctor, a teacher, even a priest, anxious to explain and persuade rather than to punish. I'm taking trouble with you, Winston, he said, because you are worth trouble. You know perfectly well what is the matter with you. You have known it for years, though you have fought against the knowledge. You are mentally deranged. You suffer from a defective memory. You are unable to remember real events, and you persuade yourself that you remember other events that never happened. Fortunately, it is curable. Right? We will make your brain perfect before we blow it out. There are no mistakes here. There can be no mistakes. You've never cured yourself of it because you did not choose to. There was a small effort of the will that you are not ready to make. Even now, I am well aware that you are clinging to your disease under the impression that it is a virtue. Now we will take an example. At this moment, which power is Oceania at war with? When I was arrested, Oceania was at war with East Asia. With East Asia, good. And Oceania has always been at war with East Asia, has it not? And remember, Winston writes this propaganda. Winston knows from his own memory that just the other week, he had been literally writing, down with Eurasia. We've always been at war with Eurasia, right? But this is the point. Big Brother can't let you have reality. There's only one reality. And if you go against it, it's your ass. Oh, and then poor Winston. It exists, he cried. You might as well be screaming, I exist. No, said O'Brien, you don't exist. Ashes, not even identifiable ashes. Winston's heart sank. This was doublethink. He had a feeling of deadly helplessness. If you could have been certain that O'Brien was lying, it would have seemed no to matter. But it's perfectly possible that O'Brien had really forgotten the photograph. And if so, then already he would have forgotten his denial of remembering it and forgotten the act of forgetting. Right? So there's not just the element of intentional psychopathy and manipulation. It's like what I said earlier about imagine O'Brien speaking to Winston and other party members listening in on O'Brien and Winston. And how does O'Brien know any of those outer inner party members don't have plans on his life going to sell him out, right? That this is how you keep everyone in line. And if so, then he'd already forgotten his denial of remembering it and forgotten the act of forgetting. How could one be so sure that it was simple trickery? Perhaps that lunatic dislocation in the mind could really happen. That was the thought that defeated him. Yes, Winston, you've been wrong. You thought they couldn't read your mind? They were reading your journal all along. They were listening to what you said. In modern terms, people feed their data freely to the algorithm. I think we should change the name algorithm to little brother. Call them little brother's helpers or something. Or just little brothers. O'Brien was looking down at him speculatively. More than ever, he had the air of a teacher taking pains with a wayward but promising child. There is a party slogan dealing with the control of the past, he said. Repeat it, if you please. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present, who controls the past, repeated Winston obediently. Where does the past exist, if at all, O'Brien asked. In records, it is written down. In records and in the mind, in human memories. In memory, very well then. We, the party, control the records, and we control all memories. Then we control the past, do we not? Right? And remember, when every man is sold out, when every woman is sold out, when everyone can be and is destroyed, right? There's a reason why no one rushes to their demise. Everyone just gets in line and goes, how much can I make off of this, right? What benefits can I glean? And he talks about the party politics. I covered this in War is Peace, right? It's like everyone is kept on that edge because the smallest of favors mean so much in prison, right? People will slave away for life for a few paper dollars and a little bit of sugar and a vacation. It really is insane. But in Winston's case, he's the insane one. But how can you stop people remembering things? Cried Winston, again momentarily forgetting the dial, right? Like Winston, you're in denial of reality by talking about reality. It is involuntary. It is outside oneself. How can you control memory? Have you not controlled mine? O'Brien's manner grew stern again. He laid his hands on the dial. On the contrary, he said, you have not controlled it. That is what brought you here. You are here because you have failed in humility and self-discipline, right? From O'Brien's perspective, Winston's being a bad party member. Hey, Winston, we could have been pals. We could have been buddy-buddies, but you just had to go against us, didn't you? Well, we will make you love us. So you would not make the act of submission, which is the price of sanity. You preferred to be a lunatic, a minority of one. Only the disciplined mind can see reality, Winston. You believe that reality is something objective, external, existing in its own right. You also believe that right, and this is the control freak nature of it. This is why our species is stuck in stasis, is stuck in time, because the retarding forces of this control is exactly what keeps you there. You also believe that the nature of reality is self-evident, but it also forces the pressure of selection, right? So when you delude yourself into thinking that you see something, you assume that everyone else sees the same thing as you, right? See, this is the intellectual's dilemma. This is the artist's dilemma, right? The artist can then make it picture the reality that they see, to then say, do you see this too? Can you see this? Do you hear this? Do you see what these characters are going through? But in Winston's case, there is no literature. There are no books. Remember, in Big Brother's world, Winston is just off in some fantasy. Really, he's going to oppose the party? Winston, look at where you're at. You're at the place where the lights never go out, and it's not Las Vegas, and it's not a party. There's only one party. And the why of it, you've been wondering the why of it, Winston? Well, first off, understand you've been wrong about everything. Second off, understand the why. Power for power, cruelty for cruelty, torture for torture, power for power, because no one ever wants to let it go. And once they figured out how to algorithmically control it down to the T, to read people's thoughts and control their reality for them, here, come into my office, Winston. I'll even give you the book. And I helped design all this for you. Oh, and by the way, I wrote the book too, right? Do you see how this whole thing is spiders and flies? Spiders and flies. It's really, a Game of Thrones. And, often it's filth on the thrones, and oftentimes the throne itself is on filth, but it doesn't stop the rare ideals of the party who represent it, and the countless beetle men who make up the rest of the corporation state. So anyway, O'Brien is telling Winston as he tortures him that Winston is the insane one, that he didn't control for anything, that he's undisciplined. You believe the nature of reality is self-evident, right? Winston thinks that 2 plus 2 is 4. Winston is insane. When you delete yourself into thinking that you see something, you assume that everyone else sees the same thing as you know. And again, a lot of you guys and gals out there don't understand this. But I tell you, Winston, that reality is not external. Reality exists in the human mind and nowhere else. But they control it through external means. Not in the individual mind, which one can make mistakes and in any case soon perishes. Only in the mind of the party, which is collective and immortal, right? Just an immortal, shitty God. Whatever the party holds to be insecure God, right? Party holds to be truth. It is impossible to see reality except by looking through the eyes of the party. That is the fact that you have got to relearn, Winston, right? He doesn't say learn. He doesn't say understand. He says relearn. Winston had been living his life for 38 years fine up into this point. But then he began to ask questions. Winston, why you got to ask questions? And it reminds me, I was looking at what was called a literary analysis or review of War is Peace from George Orwell, and the guy giving the review called it a literary analysis. But all he was doing, he was calling the book boring and stupid and kind of cynically joking about it. And then the whole of it, he's just telling you the events that happened. There is no, basically, he robbed the story of the pathos. He basically removed the tragedy and said, this story is now about X, Y, and Z. And by doing so, you can tell this is for high school students. This is for kids who did or didn't do the reading, but he's just going to tell you what happened so then you can regurgitate that pointless information on a pointless test that's largely busy work, because a smart individual has no point doing busy work, right? Or like Winston, you just work for your own dehumanization, right? You rewrite history for the party while are in unconscious denial of your own place in this precarious pyramid, right? And that's what O'Brien has to bring home through torture. Winston, do you not see how you're insane? Let me fix this for you. So whatever it holds to be true is true. That is the fact you've got to relearn, Winston. It needs an act of self-destruction, an effort of the will, right? These are just like in real life, individuals sacrifice bits of themselves for the larger whole, either in part or whole. The individual every day to go out and work and survive in this world is setting aside their own desires, their own thoughts, their own feelings. Generally, we call it professionalism, and there's a fine line, infinitely fine line between professionalism and being a slave or dominated by other people and their thoughts and their ways of life. So you prefer to be a lunatic, a minority of one. You must humble yourself before you can become sane. It's exactly what a psychopath, insecure God would say. Humble yourself before insanity. He pauses for a few moments, like as if you're supposed to be impressed, as though to allow what he had been saying to sink in. Do you remember, he went on, writing in your diary, freedom is the freedom to say that 2 plus 2 makes 4. right? Because if that goes, all else follows. In one's dreams, in one's thoughts, in one's feeling, in one's ability to connect the dots and then act on them, which Winston did do, right? Like, he did take action in this story. It's just he exists in a world where the corporation state owns every action, even rebellion. It's like MTV all over again. Corporate boomers selling irresponsible rubbish and garbage, watered down hack culture and mass produced corporate work and corporate art to the masses. Just irresponsibility, just robbing the arts blind with commercialism. It really is horrible. Um, yes, said Winston. O'Brien held up his left hand, its back toward Winston with the thumb hidden and the forefinger extended. How many fingers am I holding up? 4. And if the party said not 4 but 5, how many? Winston says 4. Winston, just say 5, right? You got the crime leader to lead the family. You got all the people willing to do the dirt because they're hungry for the money and the power too, right? Just play along, Winston. Why do you got to get in the way? So this is the end of the story. This is after, because remember, Winston is broken. Just as the whole fatalistic story is told, just as it plays out, just as we can see the seed of it coming to fruition in the end, right? Like the seed that was planted at the beginning of the story, that tragic and dramatic irony, not it's like Chekhov's self, not Chekhov's gun, but like a Chekhov's journal. Basically, that bit of suspense, that bit of information that was been told all along through an insane amount of doublespeak and meta irony in and of itself, not just in the story, but in the writing, that it takes only a highly intelligent person of a very rare variety could have ever written this story, and also written it in a way that is even coherent, because a lot of people would not be able to keep the psychology straight or the doublespeak straight. So this is where Winston is wrong, right? This is after he's been broken. They can't get inside you, Julia had said, but they could get inside you. What happens to you here is forever, O'Brien had said, right? Well, our doctors, they'll fix you right up, right? They'll change you, they'll change the way you look, they'll change your hair, they'll change your teeth, they'll change the way you speak. Maybe they'll even amputate a limb, but you will not come out of here unchanged, right? So what happens to you here is forever. That was a true word. There were things, your own acts, from which you could not recover, right? Once you sell out everyone and everything, there's nothing left to sell out. Something was killed in your breast, burnt out, cauterized out. And they were destroyed. They no longer love each other. They no longer care about each other. And they proved it by showing that when push came to shove, Big Brother showed them that for all their high ideals, that with enough torture, you will betray everyone and everything you love or that you thought mattered to you. Whatever your highest value is, the corporation state will fucking take that from you, right? So that's the tragic irony of the story, is that it was a setup from the start. The whole thing is a lie, predicated on lies. There is no way out. Winston is the last man on Earth, and he dies. That's why this story is the meta-tragedy of all tragedies, is that, again, the irony of a world that is under constant surveillance and constantly being monitored and controlled, that for a world that's drowned in attention, nobody sees anything at all because it was designed to be that way. Anyway, I think that about covers it. I'll reiterate my question. For those of you who read this book, whether it was your first time or coming back a second time, how many of you actually thought Winston, with Winston's hopefulness, with his desire for the future, the lie that the proles are going to revolt, that there's going to be some socialistic revolution, right? That anything's ever going to change, right? That the midwits really care about becoming high wits so they can help the low wits. No, that's not how any of this works, right? It's all power and a power struggle. So for you people, were you insane like Winston? Did you believe that he stood a chance? Did you believe that he was right? Because if you believe Winston is right, in context of this world, that makes you a terrorist. That makes you a bad person. That makes you a bad member of society and you need to be punished and corrected, just like in the real world when anyone violates whatever the party lines are. And it varies culture to culture, but the evaluating standpoints, what's needed to perpetuate perpetual warfare on the largest scale or petty crime at the lowest scale. You need a leader, you need people willing to commit the crimes, you need people willing to lie for the party. For every ideal man, you need like thousands or millions of beetle men, right? So it really is quite the conundrum. So did you, when you first read 1984, did you think it was going to have a happy ending? Did you think Winston was sane? I'm open for, anyone wants to talk about it, discuss it, opinions, feelings, thoughts, concerns. I don't care. Like, if you insist on imposing the correct interpretation, I'll probably just block or delete you. But if you're open to conversation, open to literary analysis beyond just what happened, right? Because the focus isn't what happened, it's the pathos of the characters. That's just the framework for which everything else matters, because what matters here are human values, right? And this is a world where that has all been extinguished. So again, welcome. I welcome your comments, questions, concerns. I'm Zach Markowski, Sharper Pen Image Consulting. This is my ongoing and our ongoing analysis of George Orwell's 1984. I got a lot more to come, a lot more questions, concerns, analyses. Have other writers and authors. We're going to continue with 1984 for a while, probably pivot into some other things, and then come back around at a later date. So anyway, thanks again for your time, your attention. I know there's infinite options out there, so I appreciate it. Anyway, have a good day. Thanks.